How can Zoloria claim such a vast expanse within our borders? It is absurd. That pact was a mistake, and it ends now, he declared, his voice echoing through the grand halls of his palace. Two mighty kingdoms stood on the brink of war. The Zoloria Kingdom and the Mombasa Empire, once bound by a pact of peace, now faced each other with burning animosity. At the center of this conflict was 1,000 hectares of land, fertile and rich, given as a gesture of gratitude by Emperor Azibo of Mombasa to King Amari III of Zoloria many generations ago. This land, untouched and unspoiled, was the spark that ignited the flames of discord between the current rulers, King Jelani of Zoloria and King Mansa of Mombasa. King Jelani, a just and wise ruler, stood firm on the legacy of friendship and cooperation that the land represented. To him, the land was a symbol of the historical bond that should not be broken. This land was a gift sealed by the blood and honor of our forefathers, he proclaimed to his council. We cannot allow it to be the cause of bloodshed. People will die if it happened. However, King Mansa of Mombasa saw things differently. Young and impulsive, he was convinced that the land rightfully belonged to his empire. How can Zoloria claim such a vast expanse within our borders? It is absurd. That pact was a mistake, and it ends now, he declared, his voice echoing through the grand halls of his palace. His belief that the previous king of Zoloria had manipulated his father only fueled his anger and desire to reclaim the land. The oldest sage in Mombasa, a wise man of great respect, tried to counsel King Mansa. Your father, the great Emperor Azibo, made that agreement out of gratitude and respect. We must honor it to avoid war, he urged. But Mansa dismissed the old man's words, convinced of the deceit and manipulation by King Amari. Determined to assert his claim, King Mansa sent a group of soldiers to fence off the land. However, they were met by Zolorian guards, who were already stationed there by King Jelani's orders to protect the area. The confrontation was tense but bloodless, as both sides stood their ground. When news of this standoff reached King Mansa, his fury knew no bounds. General Sango, gather your men. We march at dusk. It is war, he commanded. General Sango, a formidable and loyal leader, readied his troops, his heart heavy with the knowledge of the inevitable bloodshed. Meanwhile, in a small village within the Mombasa Empire, lived Alia, a woman of Zolorian descent, married to a Mombasan man. Her life in Mombasa had given her insight into both cultures, and while she loved her husband, her loyalty to her homeland remained strong. Alia secretly gathered information on Mansa's military plans, and, under the cover of darkness, sent word to Zoloria. As the war drums sounded and the two armies clashed, the land between them soaked with the blood of the fallen. Alia's espionage was discovered. She was branded a traitor and a spy. The news of her betrayal reached her husband, who, torn between his love for her and his loyalty to his king, confronted her in their home. Why, Alia? Why betray my trust? Our life here, he pleaded, the hurt clear in his eyes. Alia, with tears streaming down her face, whispered, "It is for peace, my love. Only through understanding can our kingdoms heal." But before dawn, tragedy struck. Alia was found lifeless in the forest near their home, assassinated by unknown assailants. Her death was a spark that reignited the conflict, fueling a deeper rage in the hearts of both kingdoms. As news of Alia's assassination spread, both sides blamed the other, and the skirmishes escalated into full-blown war. General Sango led his forces with ferocious intensity, while Zuloria's troops, driven by the memory of Aaliyah's sacrifice, fought back with equal fervor. As the bitter winds of war howled across the once peaceful lands, the news of Aaliyah's assassination spread like wildfire, igniting the fury of both kingdoms. Zuloria and Mombasa, embroiled in a fierce conflict, now found themselves sinking deeper into a quagmire of vengeance and hatred. Under General Sango's command, Mombasa's troops unleashed a relentless assault against Zuloria, whose soldiers were equally driven by the tragic memory of Aaliyah's sacrifice. King Jelani of Zuloria, witnessing the heavy losses his warriors suffered, knew that the conventional methods of warfare were no longer sufficient. In a desperate bid to turn the tide, he turned to ancient magics, long forbidden and feared. Summoning his most trusted mystics, King Jelani beseeched them to call forth the legendary creatures of old, beings of immense power and mystery, drawn from the very essence of the earth itself. As these formidable creatures crossed into the realm of men, the battlefield transformed into a scene from a nightmare. Twisted, towering figures emerged from the mists, their eyes glowing with an eerie light, their forms shifting and undulating. They advanced towards the Mombasa lines, their presence alone causing terror and chaos among the troops. General Sango, witnessing the havoc wrought by these spectral adversaries, suffered great casualties. His army, once proud and formidable, was now being decimated by forces beyond their comprehension. In a moment of despair, he sent a desperate message to King Mansa. "Use your powers, my king. If you possess none, then call upon the old women to summon the gods' powers. Otherwise, we will be finished." His voice was raw, his eyes red with fury and fear as he watched his soldiers falling around him. King Mansa, taken aback by the sudden turn of events, realized that he had no choice but to resort to similar dark measures. He gathered the oldest and most powerful priestesses of the land, urging them to invoke the ancient deities and harness their wrath against the invaders. Clouds gathered, thunder rolled, and energies dark and profound swept across the battlefields, clashing with the summoned creatures in a terrifying spectacle. The use of such dark powers, however, came at a terrible cost. The land itself began to suffer, its vitality draining away as the forces of magic tore at the fabric of reality. The once fertile fields turned barren, rivers ran dry, and forests withered and died. The relentless battles and magical onslaughts left the two kingdoms on the brink of annihilation, their populations decimated, their lands despoiled. In this darkest hour, with both kingdoms facing their demise, the realization of the futility of their conflict finally dawned upon the remnants of both sides. The two kings, King Jelani and King Mansa, overwhelmed by the destruction and loss, vanished amidst the chaos, their fates unknown. Leadership fell to those few who remained, wise enough to see the need for peace. Exhausted by war and driven by a desperate desire to restore what little they could, the leaders decided to return the disputed land to the Mombasa Empire. This gesture, though symbolic, marked the beginning of a fragile peace. The hope was that by restoring the original boundaries, they could also begin to heal the deep wounds inflicted by their strife. The kingdoms, now shadows of their former selves, were left with only a few grown men, the war having claimed the rest. The survivors, mostly children, women, and the elderly, faced the daunting task of rebuilding. Among them, the stories of the war, the great sacrifices made, and the lessons learned were passed down, imbued with the hope that such darkness would never again descend upon their lands. As peace reigned once more, the lands slowly began to recover. But the memory of the war and the devastating powers unleashed remained a solemn reminder of the cost of conflict and the value of peace.